Can you imagine what would happen if the best drivers in the world all raced in the same car? It would be the only way to really know who is the best. No engine differences, no teams, no excuses, just pure talent competing head-to-head. This already happened once on a legendary circuit marked by glory and tragedy, with a grid full of legends. 9 world champions, 2 future champions, and idols from different generations. Niki Lauda, Alain Prost, Keke Rosberg, James Hunt, and many more. All with the same car in a unique and unrepeatable race. But among all those giants, there was someone who shouldn't even have been there. A complete unknown, with no titles, no victories, no experience. He was there purely by chance because a spot opened up at the last minute and it was taken by someone no one expected. What no one imagined was that this driver would not only face them, but would crush them in a way that no one would ever forget. That day, the world of motorsports witnessed the birth of a legend. And even though almost no one noticed at the time, that young man began to write one of the most incredible careers ever seen. That's why today we're going to relive the day when a complete unknown defeated 9 world champions and marked the beginning of a new legend. And stay until the end because we'll see how that day not only changed his life, but also the history of Formula One forever. For decades, the Nürburgring was considered the most feared circuit in the world. Blind corners, wild elevation changes, and a layout of more than 20 kilometers that didn't forgive mistakes. It wasn't called the Green Hell for nothing, but everything changed in 1976. That year, Niki Lauda, world champion and one of the best drivers in history, crashed at over 200 kilometers per hour. His car caught fire instantly. He was trapped in the flames for almost a minute and suffered burns so severe that a priest was called to give him the last rites. Against all odds, he survived. However, the accident made it clear that this circuit was no longer viable for Formula One. It was too long, too unpredictable, and too dangerous. For this reason, Nürburgring was excluded from the calendar, and for 8 years, the German Grand Prix was held at Hockenheim, and the most legendary circuit in the world was forgotten. But not forever, because in 1984, Germany decided to bring it back. However, it wasn't the same as before, but a new one. Shorter, safer, more modern. The layout was called Strecke and was built over part of the original circuit. It was the chance to erase the past and at the same time honor it. And for that, something more than a new layout was needed. An event matching its history was needed, something spectacular, unique, and attention-grabbing. A race that would not only serve to reopen the circuit, but also to leave an unforgettable mark. And that's where Mercedes came in. The German brand took the initiative and decided to organize a special race to celebrate the return of the circuit. A race that, besides showing the world that Nürburgring was back, also served Mercedes' own interests. That's how the Race of Champions was born. From the very beginning, it was clear that this wasn't just any race, but a unique event in the history of motorsport. Because to celebrate the Nürburgring lap, Mercedes didn't just want a grid full of legends. They wanted something bigger, something no one had ever seen before. A race where all the drivers used exactly the same car with no technical differences, no aerodynamic advantages, and no secret engines. Just talent, face-to-face, no excuses. And for that, Mercedes prepared 20 identical units of a model that hadn't debuted in competition yet. A sports sedan that needed to be tested and, above all, sold. Because the Champions Race was organized to celebrate the reopening of the new track and to give it visibility. But it was also an opportunity to promote a model they had just launched, the Mercedes-Benz 190e 2.3-16. And to make everything even fairer, the cars were assigned at random. Half painted silver and the other half dark blue. Also, since they were identical, each one had the driver's name painted on it so that from the outside you could know exactly who was behind the wheel. They all had roll cages, racing tires, stiffened suspension, and safety features. Mechanically, they were identical. And if they were going to make all the factors equal, then only one thing was missing: bringing together the best drivers on the planet. Everything was ready for a show, and it was the perfect opportunity for Mercedes. Because while everyone was watching the drivers, they knew that the real star was going to be the car, but of course, the drivers were still missing. And that's where everything gets much more interesting. But before that, if you're enjoying this video, subscribe. Same cars and conditions, but not the right drivers. None of this made sense because for a race like this to work, having identical cars wasn't enough. Something more was needed. Legends were needed. That's why Mercedes went to find the 20 best drivers in the world at that time. World champions, established legends, and race winners at Nürburgring. However, bringing together the biggest names is not easy. Much less when you know you're dealing with world champions. Drivers with ego, with pride, and with an image to defend. Because even if it's hard for them to admit it, none of them wants to lose. And asking them to get into a car without technical advantages or teams backing them was like putting their reputation on the line. Even so, Mercedes managed to do it. They started with an ambitious idea to invite all the living world champions. At that time, there were 14 in total. Juan Manuel Fangio, Phil Hill, John Surtees, Denny Hume, Jack Brabham, Jackie Stewart, Emerson Fittipaldi, Niki Lauda, James Hunt, Mario Andretti, Jody Scheckter, Alan Jones, Nelson Piquet, and Keke Rosberg. The list was so impressive that it seemed impossible. And although not everyone accepted, 9 of them did. The ones who didn't participate were the following: Fangio, who at 72 years old was no longer in condition to compete, but still traveled as a Mercedes-Benz ambassador; Fittipaldi and Andretti, who were committed to the Indianapolis 500. Jackie Stewart kept his promise to stop racing after his friend Francois Sibert died. And finally, Nelson Piquet, who at that time was the reigning Formula One champion, simply declined the invitation without giving much explanation. The rest accepted the challenge, and other big names joined them. Alain Prost, Carlos Reutemann, Jacques Lafitte, Elio De Angelis, John Watson, and Sterling Moss, all of them Grand Prix winners. On the other hand, Mercedes invited 3 local figures with history on the circuit: Klaus Ludwig, Manfred Schulte, and Udo Schutz, all winners of the Nürburgring 1,000 kilometers. In addition, Hans Hermann, a former Mercedes driver from the 1950s, was also there as a special guest of the brand. For many of them, accepting was not only a matter of pride, but they also saw it as a way to thank the German brand, which for years offered cars with great discounts to Formula One drivers as part of a tradition. The grid was already historic, but there was still one spot left, seat number 20. And that's where everything took a completely unexpected turn. With Emerson Fittipaldi out, Gerd Kramer, one of the people in charge at Mercedes-Benz, proposed a name for the event that no one had on their radar: a Brazilian who had just debuted in Formula One, who had only competed in 4 Grand Prix races, and who in the previous race at Imola hadn't even managed to qualify. That was the proposed driver. He had no titles, no victories, not even podiums. He had nothing. Just talent and the desire to take on the world. But Kramer had watched him race in Formula 3 the year before and was impressed. He had felt that there was something different, something that couldn't be explained with statistics. He persuaded Mercedes to give him a chance, so a spot meant for a 2-time world champion went to a complete unknown instead. No one knew who he was, expected anything from him, or imagined what would happen. With 20 cars ready and the grid set, only one thing remained: race. Before the race, there was qualifying, and that's where the world got its first big surprise. But before that, just like in a real Grand Prix, there was practice time so the drivers could get familiar with the new track and the car. Some adapted right away, while others, especially the more experienced ones, had more trouble understanding how the Mercedes model behaved. During qualifying, it became clear this wouldn't be just an exhibition. Alain Prost set the fastest time. Behind him was Carlos Reutemann, and in third place, a name that still didn't mean anything to most people: Ayrton Senna. It was surprising. A rookie with only 4 Grand Prix races had made it into the top 3 among world champions and motorsport legends. But the most curious fact wasn't that. It was about Niki Lauda. The Austrian qualified 14th. And not because he lacked pace, but because he hadn't practiced a single lap. He had television commitments that day, so he arrived late, got in the car, and went out to qualify without preparation. But that didn't matter, because what he did in the race was worthy of a legend. And even though Senna's third place with an unfamiliar car was already impressive, one of the cars that truly marked his career was the legendary Lotus 98T. This car carried Senna through key career moments and also represents his skill and determination in Formula One. Today, while many historic cars end up in museums or restricted to exclusive events, the Lotus 98T remains alive in a unique way. Everything was ready to witness a historic race, but something happened that no one could believe. The official broadcast didn't capture the start of the race. The speeches by the authorities went on for so long that the broadcast only returned when the race had already started. So the first 2 laps were missed. When the broadcast resumed, Senna was already leading. He had started from third position behind Prost and Reutemann, but on the first lap, he overtook them both. Although Prost complained afterwards, he said that Senna pushed him off the track at the first corner. A moment that, although no one knew it at the time, was the first chapter of one of the most ruthless rivalries in the history of Formula One. And to make things worse, right after the incident, the Frenchman made contact with Elio De Angelis. Because of the contact, the Italian had to pit and lost 2 laps while his car was being repaired. Meanwhile, Prost was relegated to 15th place. While everyone was trying to settle in, the Brazilian was already pulling away at the front. And even though this race wasn't part of any official category, many took it very seriously, but others chose to drive more calmly to take care of the car. Hans Hermann, for example, didn't want to break it because he plans to buy it after the race. Curtis also preferred not to take risks out of respect for Mercedes for organizing the event. Stirling Moss simply wanted to drive a few laps and finish safely. However, as expected, James Hunt didn't take it seriously at all. He went straight to cutting corners through the grass and pushing rivals off the track. That was his style. Chaotic, wild, and totally unconcerned with the formality of the event. But Senna was the complete opposite. For him, it wasn't an exhibition. It was the chance to prove that he could be on the same level as the best, even if no one else believed it. Lap after lap, his pace was relentless. He didn't make mistakes. He didn't let up. He didn't get distracted, and while he was leading, Loud was starting his comeback. He started from 14th place, and without knowing the car or having tested the track, he kept moving up positions. And by lap 12, he was already in 2nd place. For his part, Reutemann held on to 3rd place, while further back, Rosberg and Watson fought for 4th place until the final lap. In the end, Watson managed to beat him by just half a second. The rest started to fall behind. Alan Jones retired due to mechanical problems. De Angelis lost 2 laps after the incident with Prost, and Hahn kept having fun without caring about the competition. But none of that mattered because after 12 laps, Senna crossed the finish line and achieved a crushing victory. Lauda finished 2nd with a comeback for the ages, and the podium was completed by Reutemann. On the results list, only one man had no titles, no history, and no guaranteed invitation. And yet he was the first to cross the finish line. He had beaten 9 world champions with the same car on a new circuit, and in a race meant to honor the legends. But the most shocking thing wasn't that he won that race, but what happened a few days later. But first, if you've made it this far, you're probably enjoying the video, so subscribe. No one saw it coming. Mercedes had organized the race to honor the legends, to celebrate the reopening of the circuit, and to promote their new model. Everything was set up so that the winner would be a man with history, a champion, an ideal ambassador, but a rookie won. And not only did he win, he dominated. The next day, the headlines weren't talking about Lauda or Reutemann or the return of Nürburgring. They were talking about a young Brazilian who had humiliated the best drivers in the world. A race of only 12 laps had changed everything. And shortly after, the world saw him do something even more incredible on the streets of Monte Carlo. On the other hand, many of those who shared the track with him that day understood what they had witnessed. John Watson praised his aggressive nature and his commitment. For his part, Niki Lauda was so impressed with the Brazilian's talent that years later he mentioned this event as one of the moments when he realized that Senna was destined for greatness. Curtis reportedly went directly to Enzo Ferrari to get him hired. And all of this for a race that didn't award points, that didn't have official trophies, but somehow changed everything. Because just a few days later in Monaco, under the rain and with an inferior car, Senna pulled off one of the most impressive comebacks ever seen in Formula One. But that was just the beginning of his greatness. So if you want to see his most legendary feats and understand why Ayrton Senna is considered the greatest driver in history, watch this video.